The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
2016 is a presidential election year. Ohio is a critical swing state, and once again, the eyes of the nation and the world will be watching Hamilton County. The pressure is on. The political parties have been sparring about registration and early election procedures. Donald Trump has raised the specter that the election may be rigged against him. Those responsible for running the election want to make sure that all the technology that has been adopted runs smoothly. Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Labor Day is the traditional launch of election season. But as we all know, in presidential cycles, elections are intensely fought over at least 18 months. Even races for local offices seem stretched out this year with a primary way back in March 15th. From now until Election Day, Newsmakers will focus on the most important local races. But we begin this morning with the election structure upon which everything else rests. In Ohio, the responsibility for managing the election process is assigned to the Secretary of State and then to the county boards of election, which are overseen by 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans and operated by 2 directors, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. The 2 people responsible for carrying out the elections in Hamilton County are with me this morning. Sherry Poland, the Director of Elections. Ms. Poland is a Republican, and Sally Krisel, the Deputy Director of Elections. She's a Democrat. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Gee, this is your time of the year, right?
It's our busy time.
Yeah, you're busy. Well, I would think it was your good time too. Anyway, let's begin by talking about the whole question of registration and whatever. And I want to begin with the whole question of purging the rolls, because that has been a controversy during the summer. And we have Tim Burke saying something here. Let's listen to Tim.
When we remove people from the rolls, we don't tell them that. And that's a problem, because they think they're still registered. They go to a polling place to vote on Election Day, and only then do they find out they're no longer a registered voter, and it's too late for them.
Now, Tim is on the Board of Elections as the head of the Democratic Party. Let's begin, Sherry, with what was the criteria by which voters were purged from the rolls, removed from the rolls during this past year?
Sure. There's 2 different criteria. One is that there was a cross-check that the Secretary of State does against the registered voter rolls with the NCOA list, so the National Change of Address list. And if there's voters where the addresses didn't match, then a notice was sent to those voters, because we're trying to find out where those voters live. So we make sure that we communicate with the voter accurately, and that we plan for enough supplies at the polling places based on the number of registered voters in a precinct. So that was one process. The other process involves voters who have had no activity. So that not only includes voting, but they haven't signed a petition, they haven't updated their address. So if we've received no activity from a voter in a 2-year period, we also send a voter what's called a confirmation notice. That's the same notice that's sent to the NCOA voters. Mm-hmm. And if there's no response for the vote from the voter, and there's no activity for another 4 years, so it's a total of a 6-year period, then the voter is canceled from the rolls.
So how many in Hamilton County were purged from the rolls in this cycle? Do you know, Sam?
Well, there were none canceled for those 2 reasons this year at all.
None?
No. Any voters that were canceled in 2016, which would have been the earlier part of the year, were due to people who changed their address, who moved out of state, who are deceased. Mm-hmm. So no one has been purged this year for reasons of not having activity.
There was a lot of discussion about that, though.
Right.
But at least in this county, nobody removed.
No, there were
in the state of Ohio, no one has been removed this year in 2016 for those reasons.
Okay. Now, that doesn't say, though, that people shouldn't be checking their registration.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that people know how to do that. So if we can just, here's the, go to the website for, it's the Board of Elections, BOE.Hamilton-CO for county.org. And what you get is the website for the Board of Elections, and then you can hit the drop-down menu for registration. And one of the first things, I think it's the very first thing you get, is Am I Registered? You can click on that. You can click on Am I Registered and go over. I've done it another number of times over the last few weeks just to make sure it's working. Works beautifully, and it also tells you where to vote.
That's correct.
So everybody who thinks they're registered ought to do that, right?
Yes, we encourage everyone to do that. It's not only confirming their registration, as you said, it also is informing them of their polling location. And in just a few more weeks, we'll be able to post their sample ballot so they can actually review the ballot that they're going to receive on Election Day ahead of time.
Now, if somebody isn't registered, or they know they've never registered, they've moved, well, let's take the registration. If a person's not registered, what's the process to get registered?
They can download a form from our website. They can also pick up forms at all the library branches. People are asked if they want to register at the Bureau of Motor Vehicle when they're doing an update on their driver license. There's many places that they can get a form and they submit it. The deadline to submit registration forms is October 11th at 9 p.m. at our office. We do have a drop box outside, so it's pretty convenient to just swing by and put it down the drop box. Also, if you're already registered in Ohio or registered in Hamilton County and you've moved, you can go onto our website or to the Secretary of State site and change your address online, which is a really fast way to update your registration.
And I think this is a really important point. A lot of people move and sort of forget about, they have their mail forwarded, although there's a lot of mail I'd like not to have forwarded, but they get their mail forwarded but maybe forget about changing their registration. So if a person has moved and they have not changed their address, how much of a problem is that?
Well, if they're registered in Ohio, it's really not a problem. If they forget to update the Board of Elections by the deadline of October 11th, they may still vote on Election Day. They actually can still vote early at the Board of Elections office if they choose to do so, but they're going to have to cast what's called a provisional ballot. So they need to find out where their new polling location is. It's based on where their new address, and they can find that out on our website or by calling the Board of Elections. They go to their new polling place, cast a provisional ballot, and then that ballot will be verified by bipartisan teams after the election and counted in the official count, which occurs about 3 weeks after Election Day.
So if a person has moved, you want them to go to their new proper polling place, not back to where they used to live.
No. It's important in Ohio that voters vote where they live, in the precinct where they live, so that they're voting on the issues and the candidates that represent their particular precinct.
Because things are different in different precincts.
They are.
Provisional ballots. Sally, there is sort of an aura. We hear a lot of discussion about provisional ballots, and X number of people had to vote provisional ballots. Is there a negative to that?
Well, I think there have been times when people have had to vote a provisional ballot, maybe when they didn't need to, for possibly an error at the polling location by one of our workers or at our Board of Elections office or in our lists. But it's really a safety net for folks who forgot to upgrade their registration. And it really has allowed us to count well over 80% of those provisional ballots and get their votes counted and get their then address updated for the next election. So it's really doesn't have to be, provisional voting doesn't have to be a dirty word.
Okay. Another thing that has changed in recent years, for those of us who are old enough to remember back to non-recent years, is the early voting that we're talking about right now. First off, early voting has become very popular. It's no longer the vote only when you're out traveling someplace, which was a relatively small slice of the electorate. Now early voting is pretty significant. What based on your experience, say over the last 4 or 5 general elections, what do you expect in terms of the percentage of early votes here, either by mail or by coming early and voting at the Board of Elections?
Right, about 25 to 30% of the voters cast their ballots early. So what we saw when we went to no-fault absentee is it didn't really increase overall voter participation. However, it made it much more convenient for those who already participate in the process.
Yeah.
So say in the last presidential, out of 120 1,000-some voters, maybe 20,000 of those voted in our office in person, which really kind of helped both the by mail and in office voting, help cut down the exposure and the lines at the actual precinct voting. So we're very happy when people want to vote early, and we also are very happy when people want to vote on Election Day.
Right, right. And as an observer of elections, one of the things that, or as a reporter, one of the things that I find interesting is that enough people are now voting. It tends to be much more of a cross-section. And sometimes when you report the early votes, which are the first things that you count on election night, those trends, whatever is established there, really are pretty good indicators of what's happening in that election. It's no longer, oh, these are just business people who are out traveling out of town and you have to discount what they're going to do. So it's very, very important. So early voting, registration, early voting. When can people ask for a ballot, an early ballot, if they want to mail in?
They can ask now. We actually are processing applications now. We cannot begin mailing the ballots until October 12th. Okay.
One other question I want to, one of the things in the last few elections was you've introduced a new technology, the e-book, the e-poll books. And how are you feeling about, there's been a couple of problems in some precincts. Let's be realistic. They've been only in problems in certain places. They work really well other places. Where do you think we are on technology?
We're in good shape. We did have a learning curve in November of 2015 when we first rolled them out.
Who had the learning curve?
All of us.
Everyone did. The Board of Elections staff, the poll workers, we all had to overcome this new technology and learning how to use it. But we had a very successful election in March. Got a lot of great feedback from our poll workers in November that we were then able to implement in March. And again, a lot of tremendous positive feedback from March. The main goal of the e-poll books is to speed up the line and to help cut down on the number of provisionals, and we saw that in March.
I'm almost out of time, but I've got to ask one question, and that is, Donald Trump has raised this question about the election being rigged, that somehow the votes are going to be counted in a rigged sort of way. In Hamilton County, we in fact still have paper ballots, and so just not looking at the country at large, but here, the way this is run here, what would you say about that charge?
Well, there's virtually no way to hack into our voting system to change anything because we are paper-based and because the cards that come back from the precincts on election night are self-contained, and we are self-contained down at the Board of Elections in terms of internet security. So no one can get in to any of our processes. We're not transferring any data, voting data, over the internet. So we feel relatively secure with that. And we're paper-based in that we have to do ballot accounting after the election. If we start seeing that there's a certain number of people who checked in and a very different number of people ballots that were used, we know there was a problem. And we'll be able to see that election day.
Okay. Well, good luck. If people want to volunteer, or are they be workers at the polls, it's still possible to do that. Contact the Board of Elections, and you do great work. I look forward to being back down there. I think it's like going to be my 26th year or something. So it's the best night of the year. So thank you very much for all you do. Stay tuned. Presidential campaigns operate not just on the national level, but also on the grassroots local level. Join me after the break for a representative of the local Trump and the local Clinton campaigns to explain what's happening and how they want to get you involved. Welcome back. Ever since I got involved in local politics 48 years ago, the consensus has been that national candidates, like those running for president, use rallies and TV commercials to generate excitement. But to translate that into a majority of votes in a congressional district or a state, a good ground game is essential. That translates into registering voters, especially those who would probably vote for your candidate, making phone calls, knocking on doors, not so much to change people's minds, but to identify voters who support your candidate and then making sure they get to the polls on Election Day. It's the tough nitty-gritty of that ground game that volunteers can meaningfully impact a presidential campaign. Once again, Ohio is key, maybe the key battleground state in the nation. So what do the ground games of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump look like here in Southwest Ohio, 7 weeks from the Election Day? To answer that question, I'm joined now by Alex Triantafilou, the chair of the Hamilton County Republican Party and the spokesperson for the local Trump campaign, at least in this situation, and P.G. Sittenfeld, a Democratic member of Cincinnati City Council and a spokesperson for the local Clinton campaign, at least this morning. Okay, welcome to, Alex knows that I was running around trying to get somebody from this, and I'm very happy to have both of you here. So, Alex, go back and take a look at headline stories that were being done 6 weeks back at the time of the Republican convention. There was a lot of worry about the Trump ground game, especially in a place like Ohio. How would you describe it right now?
Well, first of all, I think some of that was unfair, very candidly. You know, those people who are on social media know that occasionally there'll be a memory section of your Facebook page. I share that with you to tell you that it was August 24th, I believe, when Romney really began opening his offices here. Again, Romney wasn't successful, but you know, we feel like we're right where we need to be in this campaign. Dan, what we have on our side at this go around is high energy for the candidate. Again, if we talk about the candidate, I'm sure my friend PG will take some good swipes at Donald Trump.
We're not doing that here.
I know you're not.
We're talking about tactics.
But you know, the energy associated with his movement, and it's a movement, means that when we put out a call for bodies, when we want to do a rally for registration, which we did 2 weeks ago, when we want to go knock doors, there is a plethora of people who will come out and help. And that's really ultimately what it's about. There's just a lot of energy. So if we're just talking about the grassroots, for us, it means high energy, highly motivated Trump supporters.
How about offices? How many offices do you have in Hamilton County or in Southwest Ohio, however you're defining that?
So I know this will be airing sometime later. As we sit here today, one is officially open, at least two more will open, possibly a third. The other thing I remind people about all the time in the media business is that we have a downtown headquarters in Hamilton County that's a rather thriving downtown headquarters. We have 5,000 yard signs at the moment, fully staffed with 6 people every single day. So I count that as a Trump headquarters. That becomes the hub of all political activity in Hamilton County. That's open year round. So we've, again, and I don't think this is the kind of election that having a physical location or an office is going to make that big of a difference. We have them, by the way. So we're getting out our signs, we're doing our effort, but with electronic and smartphones and the way we, the way we contact voters in this GOTV, this Get Out the Vote universe, is we do it off of a smartphone now. So we have people making calls from home, and anywhere they want to be, they can make calls and talk to voters.
PG, how about the Clinton campaign?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm honored that the Clinton campaign has asked me to speak on behalf of Secretary Clinton's efforts and the values she stands for. Let me just start with a compliment. I want to give Alex the Good Sport of the Year award. I don't think he likes Donald Trump any more than the rest of us do.
False.
So
now that's
that crosses the line.
We can't go. Right,
I like him a lot more
if I'm
than
not
Hillary.
allowed to talk about how toxic and divisive and dangerous Donald is, let's talk about the ground game. So proud that we have a candidate who, because of the ideas she's putting out around an economy that works for everybody, around
No. How many offices? Let's get the ground
no,
game
but these things, Dan, aren't unrelated, right? When people believe with the policy positions and appreciate the values of someone, it makes them a lot more likely to volunteer. The Clinton campaign, and it's probably, as Alex said, on our side, is growing too. Already have 5 offices across Hamilton County, and even though we're mostly broadcasting to greater Cincinnati here, I was with the mayor of Dayton yesterday or 2 days ago. Montgomery County, I think she said they're counting on being about 8% of the vote. They have 20 paid field organizers in a place that's only going to be 8% of the vote. Hamilton County's even bigger. So counties all across. I was there for the office opening in Walnut Hills. People are excited. Young, old, black, white, rich, poor folks are in these offices every day, picking up packets to go knock on doors, calling voters, that direct outreach. And I think we've seen this especially in the Obama era, that being organized, especially in a state like Ohio, where, while I expect Hillary Clinton to have a healthy margin of victory, it can always be pretty tight. This can be difference making. And I think you might be looking at the entirety of the Hamilton County Republican Trump field operation is on this show today, actually.
Completely false, by the way. Look, the problem they have on their side is an awful liar as their candidate. Since he's going to take a shot.
Are we
going to
go there? Because
well,
I'm happy to rebut.
You did, so we are. And look, today we wake up and see these lies about emails on Benghazi. So look, the reason there's energy on our side is because we can't stand Hillary Clinton.
Okay, let's get back to what I really
Fair
want
enough.
to talk about.
He started
and that
it.
is, PG, you mentioned there's paid people.
Sure.
But then there's volunteers.
Right.
And, those knocking on doors, that's done by volunteers. In your situation, do you have paid staff specifically?
Absolutely, we do. So again, this comment that I'm the only, that's just false, frankly. We have paid staff here. I meet with them, I talk with them regularly. The numbers are growing, it's shifting every day, but there's absolutely paid staff here on the ground. There are offices. I mean, it's a regular campaign from where we sit, and again, stocked by thousands of volunteers in Southwest Ohio.
But Dave, can I make one point? I think part of why you see so much less organization and fewer offices for Trump than Clinton is when you have a person who Alex thinks very highly of, John Kasich, when you have people like late Senator George Voinovich, when you have people like former AG Betty Montgomery who say Donald Trump is too nasty and too divisive.
That's not what I'm doing here.
The leading lights of the Republican Party won't support Donald Trump.
It makes it
hard to attract volunteers.
Okay.
It's a challenge Alex has.
This is my show, darn it.
All right.
Okay.
I should get a
So
chance to
priorities at this point, and the first part of this show was about the Board of Elections and making sure people are registered. Are the campaigns, are you out there registering people? Because usually until that registration closes, that's important. Make sure your people are registered.
Yeah, we have an active ongoing effort to register voters. Again, 2 weeks ago we had what we called a rally for registration. We met in about 6 locations around Hamilton County going in to register voters. The other thing we're doing is if you've moved, if you've moved into a new address, we want you to update your address. I'm a member of the Board of Elections, have been for 8 years. Really important for people to get out there and make sure that their voter address is updated. So we're targeting those Republicans who we know are going to be for Trump. And we're making sure they're properly registered where they live. That's a major part of this effort for us, right up until that deadline.
I want people from every background. I think the more people that partake in our democratic process, that's good for the system as a whole. So we appreciate you taking the chance to highlight this. When Cincinnati hosted the NAACP convention, Secretary Clinton mentioned as part of that wanting to register millions of new voters and bring them into the process. So with voting actually beginning around, I don't have the exact date, but around the middle of October here in Ohio, the Clinton campaign is going to be focused on energizing a large group of existing supporters, but also reaching out to folks who might be voting for the first time.
Okay, there's things like that, and I referenced this, making the calls out of phone banks, knocking on doors, and all three of us have done this in at least our youthful period. What's really the goal there? When you're calling somebody, what are you trying to do?
What we're trying to do is identify who our voters are going to be. I mean, it really has gotten to the point now where we want to know everything we can know about you as a voter, and they're in the same boat.
Right.
And frankly, when the history of this is written one day, President Bush in 2004 and Karl Rove, the architect, really was the first major campaign to do this. And now, and frankly, President Obama did it very effectively. And both sides now are trying to identify individual voters and what they care about. Are they a gun person? Are they, they strongly pro-choice? What are their proclivities? Where are they? So we can identify them and ultimately get them to go and vote. It's really just building a profile of individual voters. It has gotten that sophisticated, and we do that using this technology.
I think Alex is right. The ability in the year 2016 to sort of meet voters where they are and initiate that conversation.
So how does that translate to Election Day?
Well, it's huge, but before Election Day, because Election Day in Ohio isn't just Election Day, it's a series of weeks.
It's a month.
A real human being who's your neighbor who can say, I live down the street, my kids go to school with your children, showing up on your doorstep or calling you before or after dinner and saying, here's why I support this candidate, here's why I believe Hillary Clinton's going to be a great president of the United States. That's probably more powerful, I think Alex might agree with this, than any attack ad is going to be. It puts a human face, it puts a human touch on the process. So to your question, it leads to real votes that determine who's the next occupant of the White House.
The word we use, Dan, is flushing. You're flushing your voters to the polls. Both sides do it. You're identifying who they are. And even on election day, in Ohio, you're required at 11 a.m. and at 4 p.m. to let the Board of Elections is required to let people know who's voted. And then there is a strong effort on both sides to make sure those people go and vote, because not everyone's like us, and they don't care so much about these affairs.
I can remember I was responsible for election day operations. You literally are calling people up and saying, do you need a ride to the poll?
Can I make one more point, Dan?
Real quick.
So Alex said to the New York Times after 2012, his party needs to do a better job, but Romney didn't win, didn't reach out well enough to independents, to 35 to 45-year-old women and young people. How's that going, Chairman?
It's another shot.
It's not a shot.
You've got the most unpopular candidate you've
fair
ever had on your side.
Get out there and vote,
Thank
folks.
Everybody should vote. Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week at a moment when Greater Cincinnati is focused on the issues around the terrible childhood poverty rate. We'll focus on the proposed Children's Services Levy in Hamilton County. Have a good week.